Señores, el senador republicano Thom Tillis ha anunciado oficialmente que ya no buscará la reelección para el año 2026. Este pequeño factor de que no buscará la reelección ha hecho saltar las alarmas en el Partido Republicano y sin duda ha enloquecido a Donald Trump. ¿Por qué es tan importante esto, señores? Porque ahora se abre una puerta muy importante para que los demócratas recuperen el control del Senado. Y según el Wall Street Journal, todo esto, lógicamente, es culpa de Donald Trump. Quiero que me acompañen a ver este fragmento de un análisis original donde se habla de esta noticia, pero más allá de esto quiero que entiendan el contexto de por qué es importante lo que está por pasar. Y luego veremos los puntos más importantes. Escuchen con atención.
Republican Senator Thom Tillis is one of those of North Carolina. He announced yesterday he's not even going to seek re-election next year. Tillis issued a lengthy statement about his decision, saying he hadn't been enthusiastic about seeking a third six-year term in the Senate. The announcement came a day after Tillis said he is opposing Republicans' massive tax and spending bill in its current form, to the dismay of the president. Trump spent the weekend bashing Tillis on social media, but Tillis seemed to ignore the posts.
Were you surprised by the extent of some of his political threats to you last night, just one after the other?
Frankly, I never read them, so I'm not really sure how many there were. Do you know? I'm not on Truth. What is it? It's the Truth Social. I'm not on that platform.
Yeah, I mean, he sort of, he pledged to meet with anyone that threatened to primary you.
Oh, that's okay. I told him actually via text that he probably needed to start looking for a replacement anyway before he posted that. If we're responsible for moving this bill, I believe that it's going to be a massive mistake. And sooner or later, you got to help the president understand that he's getting a lot of advice from people who have never governed, and all they've done is written white papers. And it's very different to talk about the perfect versus implement the practical.
I love the way he said, I'm not on that platform, the president's favorite platform, and Tillis has decided not to be on it. His departure is expected to set off a highly competitive race in North Carolina. NBC News reports the president's daughter-in-law, Lara Trump, is seriously considering a run there. Meanwhile, the Wall Street Journal editorial board has a new piece titled Trump Puts the Senate in Play in 2026. And it reads in part, quote, a common feature of Donald Trump's 2 terms as president is that he can't stand political prosperity. When events are going in his direction, he has an uncanny habit of handing his opponents a sword. The GOP pickup opportunities are few. So with Mr. Tillis's departure, the Senate is in play for 2026. Oh, and on Saturday, GOP Congressman Don Bacon said he won't run for re-election in his swing Omaha seat. That's a likely gain for Democrats in the House. Tillis and Bacon didn't help themselves by echoing Democratic attacks against the GOP's very modest Medicaid changes. But then Mr. Trump and GOP leaders haven't helped them or the party by failing to make the moral and fiscal case for those reforms. GOP legislative reforms will have no chance if Democrats take the House in 2026. And if they also take the Senate, forget about confirming another Supreme Court nominee. The Trump presidency will be dead in the water. So, Sam, does Tillis really put the Senate in play? I know that North Carolina is kind of increasingly purple. It's one that Democrats always hope to take, but the map doesn't look great for Democrats next cycle.
I don't think he puts the entire Senate necessarily at play. He puts North Carolina at play for sure. And Democrats have a ex-governor waiting in the wings who could run for that seat, and Roy Cooper, who would become the prohibitive favorite if he decides to run. But for the party to gain the majority, they'd have to flip a couple red seats, I should say, and one of them would probably be Texas. You can imagine how hard that might be. Not saying it's impossible, but it would be hard. But I want to get to another element of that Wall Street Journal editorial, which is, I think why Tillis decided he shouldn't run, which is they said that the Medicaid changes would be modest. That's just not the truth. I think people need to sort of understand the significance of what's about to happen here. When you're taking coverage potentially away from 11 million people, and that's just the Medicaid stuff, and then on top of that, add a few more million people when you have changes to Obamacare and the ending of enhanced subsidies for Obamacare, you're talking about the loss of healthcare coverage for 16 or so million people. That would be the most significant backtracking in health insurance coverage in our country's history. It would be the most significant reduction of Medicaid in our country's history. It would undo progress that we've seen in terms of enrolling people in health insurance coverage over the past 10 plus years. And it would lead, frankly, to more people getting sick, more people losing loved ones, more people dying. And Tillis on the floor of the Senate said, look, what am I supposed to do? I have 630,000 people in my own state who could lose their Medicaid because of this bill. Should I tell them that they're wrong, or should I tell the president that he's wrong? And I think he recognized that this bill would be calamitous for healthcare coverage. Now, the question I have, and I guess this is a good one for Charlie, is Tillis right to retire? I mean, this is the fundamental question that has confronted people who have opposed Trump from within the Republican Party since he burst onto the scene. Do you fight the fight, or do you leave the tent and fight the fight? And in this case, Tillis is saying, look, I don't have any sway left. I'll stick it out for another year and a half, but I'm not going to even run in the primary. Same with Don Bacon. And I struggle with the question of whether or not that's the right decision. I'm glad he went to the floor and said what he said. But should he have tried to stick it out? And if so, to what end?
Well, that is an excellent question. And, it keeps coming up over and over again. Jeff Flake made the same decision. I mean, you can tally up the number of Republicans who have self-deported, who simply realize that there's no place for them in the Republican Party. And, of course, you'd like them to stay and to fight. But that assumes that the fight that Donald Trump does not, utterly control the Republican Party. I think there's a certain level of futility about all of this. Yes, I would have liked to see him, stand and fight. But the reality is, this comes back to the Republican primary voters, and they are in fact taking their cues from Donald Trump. So you're Tom Tillis, and you're saying, do I need this in my life? Do I need to go through a bruising, ugly fight where I'm either going to have to try to appease Donald Trump, or I'm going to have to run against Donald Trump in a MAGA-dominated primary, and life is too short. So once again, achievement unlocked. Trump has driven another quasi-normie out of the United States Senate, put the Senate more in play than it was before. But this has been a long time coming. I thought it was interesting that Tillis thought it was a defining moment to realize that there was no room for independence or bipartisanship. And you kind of wonder, well, if only he had been warned, if only he had been given an indication earlier. But we've been seeing this pattern for the last 10 years, and we'll probably see it again. But, Sam raises an interesting question. I would love to see people stand and fight on principle, but the question is whether there's any room for principled Republicans in Donald Trump's party anymore, and I think we're getting the answer.
Yeah, you wonder whether he's regretting that vote for Pete Hegseth that we know he didn't really want to take, but ended up taking just totally to appease Donald Trump because he was afraid of being primaried. Well, now he's getting out anyway. Michael Snell, do you see any big changes that could happen between now and July? I don't know if the bill gets to Donald Trump by July the 4th, but whenever it does get to the president's bill, are there any significant changes that could come into effect that people should know about?
I think there's going to have to be, just because of where the current level of support stands. Starting with the Senate, for example, we heard from Senator Susan Collins, who we know is a moderate in the chamber. When she voted to proceed to this bill, voted to advance it, she made clear, do not in any way take my vote in support of advancing the bill as a translation that I'm going to support this final product. I'm not going to do that unless I see substantive changes. There have, of course, been concerns with the Medicaid cuts and how that could impact hospitals and constituents in her state. It's the same dynamic in the House. We're not just hearing some Republicans say that they're opposed to the current model. We're hearing them say that they are going to vote no. Take, for example, Congressman David Valadao. He's a Republican from California. He's a moderate. He comes from a swing district. He's saying that he cannot support these Medicaid cuts. So Republican leaders, if they want to get people on board, I suspect there are going to have to be changes. And of course, conventional wisdom, based on every twist and turn of this process, has been that, well, the Republicans at the end of the day will fall in line. And of course, there's always the strong possibility of that. Trump's pressure and the potential for his wrath is very strong. But we're seeing not just a few holdouts here and there. We're seeing large swells of people. It's not a few anomalies. So, as the saying goes, there's strength in numbers, and these have been long-stated qualms and warnings that some of these lawmakers have made. So, that all being said, I think today's vote-a-rama is going to be critical and very key. We're seeing a number of amendments being introduced by folks on both sides of the aisle. I'll go back to Susan Collins. She's introduced an amendment to increase that rural hospital fund from $25 billion to $50 billion. So again, the Senate GOP leaders and House Republican leaders need to build a coalition for this bill. At the current moment, they're going to need to make some changes if they want to have enough support to get it over the finish line in both chambers.
Michael, very quickly, I've often heard this, that there has to be safety in numbers. Do you know what the number size is that would make other Republicans feel comfortable saying no, voting no?
That is always the question, but I can tell you where things currently stand in the House. As I mentioned, I've spoken to at least 6 moderate Republicans who say that they are against this. Then there's also Thomas Massie, who voted against the first iteration of this bill in the House. He's by no means a moderate, but he's still a critic. We've heard from Chip Roy. So that's around 8 stated on the record people who have qualms with the bill in the House. If there's full attendance and all Republicans vote yeah, and all Democrats vote no, Republicans can only lose 3 of their own. So they're well over that number. And then in the Senate, we have Tom Tillis voting no. Rand Paul has made it clear he's voting no. So in the Senate, Republicans can only afford to lose 1 and still get this over the finish line.
Right.
If they lose 2 or more, that's the ball game. So we're getting really close, or in the House's case, over these margins, which is why everybody is going to matter.
Okay. Congressional reporter for The Hill, Michael Snell, thank you very much for joining us. My advice to those congressional Republicans who are opposed to this bill, delete Truth Social, which is exactly what Tom Tillis has done. You may want to stay off it for a couple of days.
Ok, señores. Primero aclaremos algo. Tom Tillis no es un progresista, tampoco es un traidor al Partido Republicano. Es simplemente un senador republicano moderado, un conservador fiscal, pero un republicano que reconoce cuando una propuesta va en contra del interés de sus votantes. En este caso, se opuso a recortes masivos en Medicaid dentro del proyecto de ley de gasto, impulsado por la agenda trumpista, ¿no? Y por ciertos líderes republicanos. Pero aquí viene el dato interesante, y es que Donald Trump salió a atacar públicamente en redes sociales a Tom Tillis. Y no solo eso, porque él amenazó con apoyar a un candidato primario contra él. Y como les dije, Tom Tillis simplemente respondió: ya ni estoy en esa red social, así que no me afecta. Lógicamente todo esto no es nuevo. Como bien sabemos, Trump prácticamente lleva años usando el miedo como una herramienta para controlar su partido, ¿no? Amenaza con primarias, amenaza con ataques mediáticos, con quitarte el apoyo presidencial al que no le haga caso. Lógicamente no es liderazgo, ¿no? Eso es chantaje político. Y ahora resulta que Tillis decide retirarse, ¿no? ¿Coincidencia? Lógicamente que no, porque él mismo lo dijo. ¿Qué les digo a los 630,000 habitantes de Carolina del Norte que van a perder Medicaid por este proyecto de ley? ¿Que están equivocados? ¿O que soy yo quien debe decirle al presidente que está mal? Eso, amigos, es lo que pasa cuando un partido deja de ser un partido y se convierte en el culto a la personalidad. Cuando uno de tus líderes más importantes decide irse porque ya no puede influir, eso no es victoria, eso es una derrota estratégica. Ahora bien, el Wall Street Journal dice que Trump está poniendo el Senado en juego para el año 2026. Y aunque suena técnico, la traducción es clara, ¿no? Su comportamiento autocrático, su comportamiento divisivo, es lo que está debilitando realmente al partido. Sé que algunos podrían argumentarme que esto no es culpa de Trump, que Tom Tillis tenía sus razones personales para retirarse, pero ¿no les parece que es medio sospechoso que tantos republicanos moderados estén abandonando el barco desde que Trump tomó el control? Jeff Flake, Mitt Romney, aunque bueno, sigue siendo senador, ¿no? Don Bacon y ahora Tom Tillis, personas que literalmente dijeron basta, prefirieron salirse antes que seguir jugando este juego. Amigos, esto no es casualidad, esto es tendencia. Donald Trump no solo divide al país, también divide a su propio partido. Su estilo de mando, basado en el miedo, en la lealtad ciega, le está costando oportunidades electorales claras en el futuro. Y ahora con la salida de Thom Tillis, sin duda el Senado estadounidense podría pasar a manos demócratas. Ahora bien, no solo significa más dificultades, ¿no?, para aprobar leyes conservadoras, sino que también es un freno absoluto a cualquier intento que tenga Donald Trump por querer nombrar jueces conservadores a la Corte Suprema en el futuro. Al final no solo está dañando a sus rivales, ¿no?, está minando su propio legado. Yo les pregunto a ustedes, ¿hasta cuándo los republicanos van a permitir que Trump decida quién entra y quién sale del partido? ¿Ustedes realmente creen que un partido construido sobre principios debería de funcionar así? Los invito a que me dejen sus opiniones en los comentarios. Muchísimas gracias por acompañarme hasta el final de este video. Recuerda, como siempre, dale like, compártelo con tus amigos y suscríbete a nuestro canal Políticamente en Desacuerdo. Nos vemos en el próximo video. Hasta luego.